Insights. I'm your host, Melanie Parker from the Hardin County Chamber of Commerce. I'm excited today to welcome Tommy Crane. This is not the first time I've interviewed you,
Nope,
but it's always good new information. Deputy Fire Marshal of Radcliff, welcome.
Thank you.
We appreciate you sharing the information because you're keeping us safe.
Hopefully.
Yes.
So.
Well, let's start. We have a lot of good stuff, important stuff to talk about. And you take what us laymen would probably consider the mundane and make it interesting. And I appreciate that. It's important information. So code enforcement, let's launch with that, shall we?
Sure. So, it's something that sometimes it gets kind of overlooked, or sometimes it kind of course, not everybody's happy when, somebody from code enforcement, or even a fire marshal for a fire inspection comes to visit
I get
them.
anxious.
So
every time they walk in the door where I'm working, I'm thinking, have I inspected? Have I checked things off?
Yeah.
But it's so important. It's so important.
It is. And that's, And in Radcliff, we kind of modeled what we do a little bit after Paducah and some other cities in Kentucky, where we pulled code enforcement over under us probably about 10 years ago or so. And we kind of looked at their models and what they were doing. And what kind of sparked that was in a lot of times we would get called for a complaint on a building or a concern, and we'd go there. Well, code enforcement would come to, and
Are
so
these usually new builds, because we have so many of those, or is it maybe older buildings?
most of the time it was older.
Okay.
It's usually maybe living arrangements or something like that. A lot of times rental places, apartments and stuff. In rental homes. So we would wind up showing up with them, and a lot of times it would be similar items we'd mark up. They would mark. There are some in the property maintenance code and the building code. There are life safety things and a lot of them overlapped with what we were doing. Right. And even some of the mundane stuff that you might not think of, keeping your yard maintained, your area around your house maintained. We've talked about that before in just, especially in dry seasons.
It's
how much
fuel.
It is. It's fuel for a fire.
It's natural fuel, yeah.
And things like, making sure all that extra stuff that you've got, we refer to it as a fuel load, and just extra, stuff you've got around the house.
Yeah.
The thing
that cluttered basement or attic space.
Right. So things like that.
Yeah.
On rental properties, sometimes it would be damage to the drywall or stuff that might pose a potential electric hazard or something. So a lot of times we were going there and we were doing the same things, and granted, like you said, not everything is, because there's a wide amount, every city has different ordinances and different, things. So the code enforcement officer is, his or her job is to make sure those are enforced properly. And they also work with a lot of different agencies. They work, with the fire department, with the police department. And I understand there are some cities where code enforcement actually falls under the police because, they, the different, however that city sets it up for, and the state
manpower.
too. Right.
Yeah.
And you have to set it up, whatever the state allows you to set up and everything. So back to the, kind of, that's how it got started while we, with the fire department and the code enforcement, worked together.
Great.
And even before that, like I said, we worked together. But code enforcement, had a history that goes back to the cities had, in the 70s, they had police courts, and that's where. So it was a local court that.
I was super little then. I don't remember that.
I don't. That was 76, pre-76, before they changed the law, and I was 2. So So in '76 they changed it to where city ordinances and city fines would go to district court, and then in '84 they changed another. They added some more stuff, and in 1992 they had ordinance enforcement procedures and a local government nuisance codes because a lot of cities and local governments and the county has a code enforcement officer as well. So, but there again, it depends. What the county has adopted and what the county.
What's an example of a nuisance code? See, I'm immediately thinking of dog barking. So what would
dogs barking?
Oh, okay.
So there, like I said, every city has, and there's actually a couple different ordinances that would affect. Talk about dogs barking.
Okay.
Some are noise, some are deal specifically with animals.
Wow. Okay.
But nuisance would also be, not mowing your yard, or maybe you've got that pool in your backyard that you've had there for 20 years. The kids are grown, and you haven't got rid of it, or you just, and so it collects water, mosquitoes, and everything gets kind of funky, and
Oh, it gives me chills, yeah.
so your neighbor, so there's different things with that. And then in '96 they added a little more Local Government Code Enforcement Act, and then in 2016 they made everything a little bit stronger, and they did some reforms, and they also established the code enforcement boards, because basically courts are already overwhelmed with a lot of stuff. So the code enforcement board is the opportunity for a lot of that to be settled in the city, and and they do have authority to enforce things.
So the fire marshal falls under that umbrella as well?
Depends on what the city decides.
Gotcha.
Yes, so
Okay.
there again, it kind of depends on what the, so for us, yes, our fire marshals, we do have a couple that are more for, one definitely that his main job is code enforcement, and one that does a little bit of both. He'll do, I have him go out and do like apartment building inspections, and then he'll do some code enforcement.
And I appreciate that. I actually rent an apartment, and I love it, and I think things safe and clean and tidy and all of that, but you don't know what your neighbors are doing.
Correct, yes. So, and there are
there's-
still some limits to what we can do. We
Right,
can't
right.
go into each individual apartment. Number one, we just wouldn't have the time and the people.
Sure.
But also, it is the whole, you do have Fourth Amendment, while you're renting that apartment, that is your home. That, so you can go in, but it would, there's procedures. You have to
course.
give a notice, all that kind of stuff. But what a lot of, some of the stuff that the code enforcement does eliminates, unpermitted home rentals. You'll have people set up shop. They'll, hey, I've got an open spot of land. I'm gonna, RV parks are big right now, all across the area. So, hey, I've got a little spot of land. I'm gonna let people rent out and maybe we don't follow the proper procedures, and we don't get with the health department. We don't get with, talk about septic systems, all that kind of stuff. So we just kind of do things on our own, and then it becomes a problem.
Don't ask, don't tell.
Right, yes. So
Yeah,
and
yeah.
a lot of times if it's tucked away, it's,
Yeah.
The code enforcement officer may be the one that finds it, either by just daily driving around, or maybe somebody alerts them to it.
Right.
So we want to make sure everybody's safe and healthy.
Good.
One of the things is helping others help themselves. So many times people think as code enforcement is like I guess kind of the code police, that their only job is to go out and cut your yard and clean up your garbage, and there's more to it than that.
Right.
A lot of times they work with fire, EMS, police, the health department, and so there's a lot of agencies that work together. They may be, we may go out on a run and be alerted that there's somebody, maybe it's an older person, or maybe somebody whose health is in bad shape, that they, they need something, some help, or maybe they're a person who is a hoarder, and that is a poor living arrangement.
Right.
And sometimes there may be things that we're limited on the government enforcement side, but we can contact other agencies.
Right.
Or, in some communities, they work well. They have community action groups that will help. Maybe it's an elderly person, and maybe nobody knows, that they don't have kids that live locally.
You don't know what you don't know.
Right, and sometimes, it's kind of asking the communities to take responsibility for your community,
And your neighbors.
Right, yeah. So it is that. Reducing unnecessary expenses. There's a lot of ways where, through code enforcement, making sure that, checking on blighted or vacant houses. Those are something, because on the fire inspection side, I'm usually not going to go to a vacant house.
Right.
I might go to a vacant commercial building.
But other people will.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Other people will that probably aren't supposed to be there.
Right.
So it does benefit the community with the code enforcement, making sure that those houses, if they are vacant, are they secured?
Sure.
Are they being maintained? A couple of different reasons for that. If the property doesn't look like it's secured or maintained, then that invites inhabitants that you don't want in your
Right.
community.
Who may be doing what they need to do to keep warm.
Right.
And that
Yes.
poses the problem.
That poses a problem. Squatting, illegal, activities. So yes. So that things like that benefits the police.
Sure.
Benefits them knowing that those houses are taken care of and that they're not a home for somebody that shouldn't be there
Right.
for whatever reason.
I'd love to say that's not a problem in Hardin County, but that's a problem everywhere, I would say.
It's a problem everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes. So it is something that we have to keep an eye on. The other thing is, it helps to make sure that think of property value. When you're thinking if your home is next to you keep your home well maintained and you're next to a home that is not being well
Right.
maintained, it contributes to your property value, and so it affects everybody, and even as the community.
Right.
You drive through a community, and you want to you want to see a community that looks like it's
Sure.
taken care of
Pride
and it's a
and
good place.
ownership.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have to understand that when you live in an area where there's more than and you don't have like 20 acres between you and somebody else,
Yeah.
that what you do can affect somebody. A lot of times I'll get called for illegal burning, or
I bet that's a common one.
so it can, yes, depending on the time of year, yes. But that's why the city has ordinances on different what can be burned, what can't be burned. So we'll go out and check on that, and things like leaves and grass clippings, especially when they're damp, they make a lot of smoke. Well, you've got people that especially maybe someone older that has asthma or emphysema or something where it's or COPD, where that little bit of smoke, or if it turns into a lot of smoke, depending on the how much humidity and stuff's in the air, it can really be bad. And,
Sure.
And plus, sometimes it just plain stinks.
Yep.
But
And
there
we
are
all have
things.
that one person in our family that's like, I got this.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah,
set
yeah.
this fire, and I'm not going to say they're all men, but
Right.
primarily, just saying. But we've all got at least one in our family that's like, I know how to control a fire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
we all have that.
So there's things like that, and just making sure that people are safe and considerate. So it is beyond just the tall grass, the abandoned
Sure.
cars, things like that. So those are things we try to look at.
And those kind of probably pull in critters, too.
Yes. So that's another thing. If it is not just people, unwanted inhabitants, but you do have things, some animals like that nice quiet area.
Yeah.
If the grass is nice and tall or it's nice and shady, then I've gone into buildings, commercial and residential, where raccoons or squirrels
Right.
or birds.
I like watching the
have been in
videos, but
a
I
lot
don't
of
want to
damage.
come across, an
Yeah, so,
angry
right.
critter somewhere in the yard. Yeah.
Yeah, so or in the building, you'll have to ask the mayor, JJ, about in one of his buildings. It was a commercial building, but somehow there was a raccoon that was getting in. There was no trees around. There's nothing like around the
They're
building.
smart little things.
And it was crawling
Resourceful.
in through where the cable,
Oh my
TV
gosh.
cable was. So it had figured out it could climb up and get in there, and just did a lot of damage in the attic area.
Oh,
And so,
yeah, just
but-
trying to make it cozy.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it fell through the ceiling
Oh my
while he
gosh.
was back in part of the room. So you'll have to ask him
I
about the
will ask
surprise
him.
he found. So
I would love to ask him about that.
But it is, and sometimes you don't. Like that one was one of those. It was really surprised because there weren't like a bunch of trees
Sure.
overhanging. There wasn't a bunch of it was a parking lot around it,
Completely
so very
unexpected.
open. Yeah. So it was,
Yes.
but there are cases where it is obvious that it is a habitat that they would want to be in.
Right.
And something as simple as birds building nests. I find a lot of times where if I write people up for, it seems kind of mundane, but dryer dampers, that they don't have them properly protected.
Right.
And and even sometimes birds are very persistent. And I've seen them. I was doing an apartment building inspection not too long ago, and while the manager and I were standing there talking about different things that need to be done to the apartment building, we watched the bird, and she actually kind of clung to the side of the brick and pushed the louver door up and got in there, and she had a nest in there. So,
Yeah.
so it does happen. And
It does.
Yeah. So
Last year I had a bird nest in my hammock chair on my balcony. And I was very sad that I could not use my hammock chair for a very long time. So they're going to do what they're going to do.
yes, definitely.
Yes.
So code enforcement is very important. And a good code enforcement officer is someone who also they'll work with people in the community.
Sure, not the enemy.
Right. And a lot of people, we want people to see that as code enforcement, as fire inspectors, as law enforcement, everything that we're doing is to benefit the community.
Right.
Because the community is, we're customer based, and the community is our customer.
Yes.
They not only are our employers, but they are also who we serve, and so everything we're doing is for the benefit of the community.
Right.
Now that individual person might not be happy to see you because you're like, hey, but there's also times too, like we've had a lot of rain recently.
Yes.
So obviously it's going to be difficult for some people to get out and mow their yard. Maybe they work a lot, and like the day that they were off,
It'll double in height overnight.
Yes.
With all this rain, it's crazy.
So that's that's something to think about too.
Sure.
And then also as a neighbor, consider that just because you don't think it looks attractive might not mean that other person, So there are things to, maybe somebody's got some plants that they think are very pretty and they like them, so there is that, and sometimes the code enforcement officer and the fire marshal as well is sometimes kind of like a little bit of a mediator.
Right.
Like, well, maybe we could do this, maybe, and in the fire side too, a lot of times, we try to offer solutions, so maybe if you did this, maybe this would be beneficial, and that kind of thing.
Mediator is good.
It is,
Yeah.
and the other thing too is we're not trying to, a lot of people, especially some that see me, they're like, oh, how much money is this going to cost me? And we see the dollar signs on that end, on the how much the preventative end, but a lot of times we forget that down the road that it will actually save quite a bit. Just like we talked about property value,
Right.
Or how much does it cost to, how much is it time and labor is it costing the police department to have
Right.
to, patrol or go in and send extra officers?
It's not a
or-
money machine. It's
Right,
about
right.
safety.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing too on the vacant and blighted buildings is whether it's commercial or residential, if there's a fire, how does that affect us? As firefighters, what are we running into? We may not know that there's squatters in there. Or maybe it is, it's a vacant one, but maybe maybe somebody was doing some remodeling,
Right.
and maybe there's something that we didn't know, and we go in and it endangers our firefighters.
It's like you talked about the raccoon going through the floor and scaring Mayor JJ.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah.
that's funny, but at the same time, you don't know what animals have gotten in there and caused those things. And then
Right.
here you all are going in. That's scary.
Yeah, or people that have done things and and sending so that's where the like I said, code enforcement and law enforcement and EMS and fire, a lot of times they communicate.
I love that you
And
all
so-
work together.
So definitely,
good.
yeah. So and it, like I said, it's at the end of the day, we're trying to make it a safer community for everyone.
Yes.
And a more attractive community
Right.
too. So it all helps there as well.
We are the fastest growing community in the state of Kentucky.
So
So
yeah,
you all
I mean,
have
the
your work
area-
cut out for you.
So yeah, so I mean, it is. You have the growing, but you also have just like I said, there's things that you don't always see. That you drive by the house and it's like, well, the house looks all run down. Maybe it's a widow that she doesn't have someone to take care of her. So we'll like last year we had one of the local churches had some people coming in to do some work around the community, and the pastor called and said, hey, we got somebody coming in, do you have some homes that, and so we were able to say, hey, we've got this place, and this place
Yeah.
that, check on these people. We think that they might be benefit from it.
I happen
So-
to know that United Way right now has projects going where I know Swope Family Dealerships, they went in and volunteered to help do some things because they know how valid and important United Way is and all that they do. But they are accepting volunteers, organizations, and individuals to do just that in our
Yeah.
community, go and help do a little bit of maintenance at people's homes locally. It's a
Right.
great project.
It is, and if you're a church, you're a congregation, you're looking for ways to help. I think missions worldwide are important, but sometimes the greatest mission is the people next door to you.
Down the street, yeah.
Yeah. So that may be an opportunity for your church to say, hey,
Yep.
somebody was talking about this lady down the street that she needs, she's got the gutters falling off, the wood's rotting around the, the fascia. So let's go help, got a messed up front porch, can't get off the front porch because it's, so those are things that we look at. And then like we talked about too, health concerns, a lot of times, we had one not too long ago where we discussed with EMS, a concern for somebody would, about getting access to their home, for EMS and for us, because you get three or four, two to four people in there trying to maneuver a stretcher or something, or like you said, a front porch that's about to fall in, so that's a safety concern for us, so that's things that we have to look at.
And those are things people just don't think about in their day-to-day life.
Right, and and some of it just kind of happens over time. You're like, well, I'm going to work on that, or I'm going to work on that, or
we all have that problem.
Yes. So
put it on the list.
That's right, definitely. And then just kind of going into fire inspections, why they're important for us. We've got several big fires that we can look at through history. That those fires actually help progress the changes in fire codes and things like that. Good. So, one of the ones, here in Kentucky was the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire in the late 70s. That really changed a lot of the how we're, changed how we do building inspections, fire inspections, that kind of stuff, and it really set the, a mark to start from there. The Rhode Island Station nightclub fire, in the early 2000s, that was a big one. And then I think about a little over 2 years ago, we had the apartment fire in the Bronx, where there was a space heater being used continuously. It was one of those where the fire doors didn't work the way they're supposed to in the stairwell, so people that were several floors up actually died because of the way the fire progressed.
That's crazy.
So those are things that we think about.
And you have to respect the process. We have the chamber luncheon every month at Pritchard Community Center. Our cutoff is 320. And we get right there. I'm not going to lie. We get right there. We cut it off at 300. Then you're going to have a few stragglers. But we respect the process. You all know more than we do. So we always make sure that we always talk about the fire marshal, and we're cutting it off. And you just have to respect the people to do their job and know what they know.
Right. Because, first thing we look at is, if there was a fire, can we get everybody out safely?
Right.
So that's why things like where the doors are, making sure the doors aren't blocked, making sure they're well marked, and sometimes they're like, I may go do an inspection and the only thing I find is an exit sign not working. But that exit sign was put there, for a reason, to make sure, maybe you work there every day, you know where the exits are,
right.
you know that, okay, but
it's easy
you
to
have
take
customers,
that for granted.
right, you have customers that come in and they may go a different route, and then when something happens, and now we got to find our way out.
I will say, props due at Pritchard Community Center, when I do you have to know these things when you're an event planner. When I try and add a table somewhere, they're the first one to say, nope.
Yeah.
See that exit sign? See that door? Nope.
Right,
they're good about that. Yes.
So definitely the capacities, and that changes with the different types of occupancies, just how the doors are. The Beverly Hills Supper Club, the doors open inward. So what happened was, there were so many people pressed against the doors.
They couldn't open.
The responding firefighters, so they couldn't open them coming out, but then when the responding firefighters got there, now they face the problem because they can't get in.
Right.
They can't get in to rescue the people and then to put the fire out. So that was part of the, so
I
so
bet
things
a
like
lot
that
of things changed after that.
Definitely.
All over.
The importance of doing the inspections, whether it be code enforcement or fire, is that we want to be consistent. We don't want to go. We don't want to go back. We don't want to become complacent.
Right.
So what frustrates people a lot of times though is since there aren't as many measurables on that end. You can't. How many lives were saved because we made sure smoke alarms were put in properly, things like that. So usually our count always seems to come from the bad things that happen. How much money did it cost? How many lives did it cost? Or how much? So unfortunately that's where most of our measurables come from. So we got to take that as our benchmark and let's move away from that.
Exactly, but you'll never know how many lives it's saved. You
Right,
just have to
right.
know.
Right,
You
yes.
can't put an exact number on that, but you
Right.
know it's vast. It has
Right.
to be.
So you're hoping that, you see those numbers go down, that's your kind of, okay, so we haven't had this many people, and the main thing is like, commercial and places of assembly like churches and schools and things like that. We've reduced that. Our biggest thing is still residential, trying to make people understand, like we were talking about apartment buildings.
It could never happen to me.
So right. So that's why the things that we try to get out and we educate. That's why we like to do things like this, so we can help people understand
Right.
that we're not there to beat them with a stick and
Right.
and
You're not the
fine 'em.
bad guy.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so everything kind of evolves and kind of works together. But that's that's where our main thing is to try to get the education out and
Good.
try to work. Whether it be code enforcement or whether it be fire inspections, we're working to make sure that it is safe for everybody.
Y'all are not just driving up and down the roads trying to find somebody to pick on.
Right, yeah,
You got better things to do.
And we have been, and people will look at it like, oh, well, you're picking on me. We're
Right.
like, well, no, here's the reason. And the other thing too, if I come back to visit you multiple times, well, if we get it fixed, then you won't have to see me for a while. I try to relay that to them too. It's like, well, I need you to get it fixed.
Yeah.
And,
Help you, help us.
Right.
Yeah.
And the one thing that a lot of times I get is well, as long as you're happy. It's like, well, it's not really whether I'm happy. I mean,
Satisfied, maybe.
yes. So at the end of the day,
Right.
I want to be able to go home and know that we have made a difference.
Sure.
Positive difference for the safety of us, for the safety of the people that are living or going to church or going to school or
Right.
working. That their everyday lives are made a little safer.
Right.
The community's a little neater. And we've done our job to try to just make it a better place for everybody to live.
And there is sometimes somebody needs a little help.
There is.
I truly enjoy the videos online where these fellas just knock on random doors of elderly folks or disabled folks and say, hey, can I clean up your yard? No cost. I'll
Right.
just do a video. And it is so satisfying to watch them clean up those yards
Right,
and get
right.
rid of all that debris and the folks are always very appreciative.
Right.
So I encourage people to do that. Take care of your neighbor if you've got your mower out,
Yeah. So, but yeah. So I mean, it benefits everybody. Like I said, the way, just the cleanliness of the neighborhood. The safety of knowing that if and trying to get those vacant houses where somebody will live in them.
Right.
So that's a big thing. Somebody that will be a good neighbor. And like I said, it benefits us, on the fire and EMS side and the police side. We have to make sure that it's safe for us as well.
Yes, that's a big
benefit.
one.
It is, so that's something we think about when I'm doing fire inspections. Is how also will this affect us if there is an emergency here?
Right.
What will keep us safe? What will help us to be more efficient in what we're doing
Right.
and things
And
like
I
that.
think as a community person, we have a responsibility to take care of you all, and make sure that you're safe. I'm afraid we are out of time. I can't believe it always goes by so fast, and I have like 1,000 more questions, so we'll have to have you back soon. But I really want to encourage our listeners, our watchers, to take responsibility for your own personal space today.
Right.
Just do that. And if you can just do that and can overflow into taking care of a neighbor, that would make your life much easier. Trust the process.
Yes, the
right?
big thing is trust the process.
Yes.
Because if you do call and you have a complaint, it doesn't mean it's going to instantly be taken care of.
Right.
So there
These
is
things
a
take
process.
time.
Yes.
There is. Well, Tommy, thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time. I know you are a very busy man, and hopefully we can project and help you keep you and your fellas and your ladies safe so that you all can do what you need to do for us.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
I'm Melanie Parker. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.